Welcome to the 2020 GovHack Virtual Conference. We're a festival of ideas using open government data to make our communities better places. GovHack is an international competition for people of all abilities who seek to make life better through open data. In a few weeks' time, on the weekend of 14th to 16th of August, thousands come together in what has become one of the world's largest open data competitions. We normally run these events physical locations throughout Australia and New Zealand every year. However, due to physical distancing measures to help to stop the spread of COVID-19, we're holding a series of online sessions over the next 2 weeks. We're hoping to deliver an interactive experience through YouTube. So if you're viewing the embedded video on the Hackerspace, click on the video title or the YouTube logo to open the video in a new tab and join the conversation. Up first tonight, we have Michelle Howie, developer advocate and product specialist at TelstraDev, introducing the APIs and a demo of their SMS messaging API. Welcome, Michelle.
Hello, thanks Matt, and thanks everyone. It's great to be here today. I really love your introduction in saying how GovHack is about open data, open source, open communities for all abilities. And that's what I'm really passionate and excited about too. And I hope that people of all abilities, technical, non-technical, no matter what age you are, you can get involved in GovHack. And today I'll be talking about a technical tool, a technical system of tools called an API that you might be able to use in your prototype with GovHack. So I hope you enjoy. I felt this was quite an important topic, as APIs are increasingly important for any kind of digital app and system. And as you guys all know, you don't have to be in technology to be affected by technology. And in the same way, you don't need to be a developer yourself to be able to use these systems. So as technology is becoming cheaper, simpler and easier to pick up, we're going to see that innovation is coming out of not just engineers and developers, but through open source communities, through low code and zero code apps. All you need to be is a problem solver. So I'm hoping to inspire some of you guys today. And in the future of innovation, we really need all kinds of people to get their hand on these tools. So that's what we'll be talking about today, an introduction to APIs specifically for communication. And yeah, I'd love you guys, as Matt said, to be interactive in the chat. And after the session, you can share your screenshots or photos of you dialing in from home virtually on our Twitter handles there. So I do have a fantastic colleague from TelstraDev, Army, who is monitoring the YouTube comments at the moment. So if you post anything in the chat there, she'll make sure that it gets answered. If you're watching this as a recording, feel free to have any questions posted on our community forum. So at dev.telstra.com/forum, and I'll take your questions even after the session. So a little bit about me. I'm what's called a technical evangelist. So I love spreading the good word about technology and how it can be used for good. So at the moment, I'm with TelstraDev as a developer advocate, so helping the developers that use our platform be successful with our technologies. And before that, I worked in Telstra's 5G Innovation Centre here on the Gold Coast. So I've got my Hawaiian shirt and my background. This is actually a picture I took outside just the other day, my virtual background. So yes, I was in engineering here in the 5G Innovation Centre. So everything I do is about technology. But outside of work, I'm obsessed with South Korea. I studied there as part of my engineering degree. And the last point I've got there is about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I think it's quite relevant for GovHack that we're not hacking just for the fun of it. We're hacking solutions together for the greater good of Australia and New Zealand and all the international participants. And I think we should be using technology as an enabler. Enough about me. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an intro to TelstraDev, because when people think about Telstra, they think about SIM cards in phones, right? But with the Internet of Things, so that's the IoT, we are connecting all kinds of devices, from traffic cones and vehicles to SIM cards and smart glasses and smart watches and pet trackers and everything in between. So the world of telecommunications is not just for people with phones, it's for so many different kinds of developers and devices. So here we've got the API and IoT marketplace, where developers can access Telstra's core network through APIs and our IoT devices. So right now, if you want to head to that URL, dev.telstra.com, and register, then as we do the session today for the next 40 minutes or so, you can follow along and actually do the demo with me. So I've got there, why should you care about these sort of developer communities, not just TelstraDev, but other developer portals out there. They're really important for rapid prototyping. So what I mean there is when you're doing Hackathon over just a weekend, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? Telstra has this amazing infrastructure that can send and receive calls and text messages. There's no need for you to try and build the same thing. So what we're doing here is just exposing that service through APIs. You can keep focusing on what's really important, which is making great things. Okay. So without further ado, I'll introduce today's challenge. We're going to be doing 3 things today. We're going to understand APIs and communication APIs specifically. We're going to be able to send a text to yourself using a web API, and you're going to be able to recognize the possibilities for making the complex simple with these APIs. And I'm going to say it again, you don't need any coding experience. We're not going to be doing any coding today. We're going to be using a no-code tool called Postman. So this is open for everyone. And this is sort of an introduction to automation. I've said this word a few times, and I'm sure some of you out there are still wondering, what is an API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface, or Program Interface sometimes. And application is the app, I guess, that you're using, and interface is how you interact with that app, right? So APIs allow different apps and services to communicate with each other. It's usually 2 different software systems that are like talking to each other. And APIs are really key building blocks in a lot of the digitization initiatives going around at the moment, like smart cities and the Internet of Things. Because Internet of Things and smart city are built on digitization, right? They're machine-to-machine communications talking to each other. So they need some way to talk to each other safely, securely, and efficiently. So the 4 kind of things that APIs can do, or the 4 things that using an API can do for you, getting access to data. So for example, there's a weather API that things like Google and Alexa use to get the weather for you. So you don't need to access the entire database of every single temperature measure all across Australia. You just need to ask for the exact data that you need without, getting a database. APIs hide complexity. So like I talked about with Telstra, we've got all of the complicated things to send and receive text messages. You just need to know how to use the API to do that. Extending functionality. So you're taking something simple and adding more value to it without adding complexity. And security. So it comes back to what I said earlier, is you have access to only the data that you need, not the entire database. So an example of an API that's helping with security is when you log into a new app, instead of creating a new account, you might sign in using Google, and Google will ask your permission. Can this app access my GPS data? Can this app access my microphone and whatnot? So
Permission is a 2018 movie directed by Brian
Google. My Google is going off.
Rebecca Hall.
Hi Google. Anyway, so now you know a little bit more about APIs. Have a think about what APIs that you know and that you use every day. I'll give you some examples of some later. And think about the different software that you communicate with every day that could potentially be enhanced by using APIs. And remember, APIs are powering pretty much everything. So even non-techies need to appreciate and understand the implications of APIs. And there's so much information online that if you wanted to go on YouTube after this talk, you can have a bit more of a technical, deep dive understanding on APIs, but I'm going to stick pretty high level. I'm going to give you an analogy for an API. So this is a non-technical example using the waiter as an example of an API. When you think about APIs, the way I've explained it is specifically for REST APIs, they're kind of acting as the middleman or middle person. So the waiter or waitress is who you as a customer interact with to get access to all these amazing things, all these like food sources in the background. You don't need to know the chef or speak to the chef. You don't need to understand the recipes, memorize the recipes. You don't need to know which ingredient is on which shelf and what temperature to boil at. All you need is a menu and to be able to order from the waiter. So if you think about a waiter as an API and you are the app, you're requesting and receiving data from that API as a response. So an example of a request might be you've read the menu and you want a halloumi burger. You're going to request that to the waiter and they'll give you that response by working in the background. They work with the chef, they work with all that and bring out your burger. An example of one in the opposite direction, the waiter might request a bill from you, they might request payment and you might pay back to the waiter. But this is sort of giving an example of how you can access third-party resources without having access to all of that complicated information. And that's why APIs are really important for non-technical people or people who are just starting out, or even seasoned, experienced developers who want to make life easier. You don't need to recreate the wheel. Yeah, so that's a little bit about APIs as an example. That's a pretty common example when we talk about APIs. So I'll give you now an understanding of how APIs sort of come into my morning routine. So if I wake up in the morning, I have a Google device, and I won't say that too loud because she keeps going off. But if I ask what's on my calendar today, there'll be an API call going into my calendar and bringing out the top things I have today. So 5 p.m. you're presenting at GovHack, 7:30 you've got a netball game tonight. So they're not copying and pasting everything out of my calendar, just using an API. I want to get the news, so I've told my Google which news feeds I want to come through my day, and they'll use an API to get the top headline of the day. Same thing with the weather I mentioned before. Then this same assistant, it could be Alexa, it could be Siri, whatever, you can actually call Spotify APIs using that assistant. So you could be asking, today I feel like listening to Beyonce. I might ask for a specific Beyonce song or like a whole Beyonce playlist, and it uses APIs to go into Spotify. I'm sure you guys have had the example where you're listening to a great song and you want to share that to your friends. I can then, through the Spotify app, share that to Instagram through an Instagram API. So you can kind of see how everything here is connected, and we're not having to go into different apps and out of different apps to be able to access all the resources in the back end. And then the last two examples are examples of messaging APIs. So today, sitting at home, I get a text from Australia Post. You've got a delivery coming at about 11 o'clock. Will you be home? Where else am I going to be? Yes. So that's another example of two-way communications. And not that anyone's going anywhere right now, but I'm sure you've experienced too, when you're checking in for a flight or when you're getting ready to board a flight, they might send you your boarding pass via text, or maybe a reminder, Michelle, your flight is in 4 hours, you haven't checked in yet. So I'm sure that you've experienced at least one of these examples in your everyday routine, and they're all powered by APIs. Okay. So we talked about APIs. I'm going to get a little bit more specific about the one we're going to talk about today, which is the messaging API. So messaging APIs allow you to send and receive lines of code. So that doesn't make sense if I'm going to pick up my phone and send you a text. It doesn't make sense to be writing a script like a program to do that. But if you send multiple messages a day which have similar content, or you're sending one message to multiple people, that's when that scalability becomes a problem. And writing a few lines of code is actually going to save you hours, right? I'm sure you can think of a few examples of that. And because APIs, like I said, allow you to integrate with other systems, you can actually have much more richer content in those SMS and MMSs. Productivity, of course, is a big bonus from that. And there's actually a study that texts are much more likely to be open than emails. So if you're sending some really critical information, like an alert, a government alert, there's a fire in your area, please evacuate immediately, that's a real critical information that needs to be read. So going through emails, making phone calls is not really scalable. Text is going to hit them up. And as I mentioned before, the reason why Telstra has a messaging API is we already have all the infrastructure needed in the back end, and it's makes sense for us to expose that functionality on the outside. So some more examples of how messaging API can be used. The first one is alerts. I mentioned government notifications. I mentioned my delivery notification with Australia Post. The other day I got a text saying my parking was about to expire, which is really handy because if they sent me an email, I wouldn't have checked it. And then, of course, ride shares could be using text to alert you if your driver is there. Another example is reminder. So as well as having a high read rate, texts are really good for reminders because it's going to reduce no-shows. Doctor's appointment, that's not a tech company, that's a health clinic, right? But they still need to be able to understand the implications of APIs. So, if I've got a doctor's appointment, I might get a text the day before saying, hey, Michelle, reminder, your appointment's at 2 o'clock tomorrow, can you still make it? So it's reducing no-shows, it's allowing me to communicate two ways and either accept or reject that appointment. Another one, I had interactions through text. My plumber to come in, and my plumber is, I'm sure, too small to hire a developer in their team, and I can assume they're not a software engineer. But my plumber, she can do this all by herself with some low-code APIs to make her small business work better. And of course, you can get text through confirmation marketing and one-time passwords, but they're kind of obvious. Okay, so I hope you guys have had a chance to go on the TelstraDev website and register for a developer account, because that's the first step for today's demo. So go to dev.telstra.com. So that's the first step, create developer account. The next step, we're going to check the documentation for the messaging API. So in the example I gave before, when the waiter is like an API and you're like the customer, you are the app, you have to have a menu there to read from, right? The documentation, which comes with every good API, is like the menu to order from. So you would walk to a restaurant and just walk up to the waiter and start jabbering off some food that you don't know is on the menu. Anyway, that's number 2. Number 3, we're going to open up the API collection in a tool called Postman. And you don't have to use Postman, but that's what we're going to use today, because that's what we're the easiest way to get started with APIs, I think. And the 4th step, we're going to get your TelstraDev credentials into Postman so that we can authenticate ourselves as a user. So that's an important step for security. The 6th step, we're going to create ourselves a virtual mobile number that we're going to be able to send and receive text from. And number 7 is we're going to send the API. We're going to open the API, add a to number, and send it. Pretty easy. I mean, I could have put that in 3 steps, but I just wanted to show you guys how simple it is to actually do this. All right, so if you've created a developer account, you can follow along with me at home. Let's get to it. All right, so I'm going to open up there. There we go. We're on the TelstraDev website, dev.telstra.com. You need to go in and register. So you need to put in your first name, last name, of course. Verify your email address and mobile number instead of password. I don't have an event code for today, but sometimes next time you register, maybe we'll have one. But I've already got an account, so I'm going to just log in. Oh no, I've been signed out due to inactivity. Very safe here. It's timed out on me. You guys have a chance now to sign in and register yourselves. Signed in. Okay, so this is the TelstraDev portal. Welcome. You can see that we've got a couple of things up here in the community. So the really cool part about this developer portal that I think is that when you're using it, you're really part of a developer community. So we have the forums that I mentioned before, so you can jump on if you want to messaging API or the IoT, then I can actually jump in and answer your questions, or another developer can come in. So for any developer portal, you should look into the forums. I've also got some blogs. So we post some community blogs to update some new features that we have, or maybe I've got a tutorial about how to use a new API. So if you enjoyed today's session with the messaging API and want to learn more, jump onto the blogs. I mentioned Internet of Things, IoT. So with Telstra, we've got the connectivity, so the SIM cards. We also sell the devices, and then we have the platform and APIs on top of that to use it. So you can head to the IoT marketplace. But today we're going to be using APIs. I'm going to go to the API marketplace. And if you do want to know more about the IoT devices, I can do another session maybe next year. But here's one of the devices that we've got on there, the Arduino kit, which is a really good one to get started with. I have a couple of tutorials on how to use this one with the messaging API too, if this is a bit too easy for you. And track and monitor is a fun one too. We have these devices where they have a SIM card in them and a GPS tracker, so that you can put them on, for example, if you're a milk company, you can put these tracking devices in the milk carton at the dairy farm, and then it can follow it all the way, if it's been exported into Singapore or something. And that API lets you have access to that information. And I talked about how APIs are scalable, and this really makes sense when you're going to have tens of thousands of tracking devices, right? So you're not going to ask the system to do them one by one. You're going to use an API to bring out all of the devices, maybe put it onto a graph or something. Cool. So I've gone to the messaging API. Here's our menu. So if we're using the same analogy that an API is like a waiter at a restaurant, this is the menu, documentation. Every time you use an API, have a quick look through the documentation. Got a little bit of introduction to what the API does. and then some of the features of the API. So maybe I'll just bring up alphanumeric identifier. So I'm sure you guys have got a text before, say from Australia Post, like the example before, and it won't say from 61234567 a mobile number. It'll say from Australia Post. So that's the alphanumeric identifier for that number, from that number. So we can do things like change that one. Maybe receive messages. So we're not going to do that today, but that's something else that you can look into later. So to be able to send a text is one thing, but to be able to receive a reply and actually do something with that reply, that's another feature of the API. I didn't mention, but when you sign up for TelstraDev, it's obviously free. And this messaging API is included in that free account with a free trial. So you get up to 1,000 messages. So hopefully we won't use that many tonight if we do everything right. If you keep going down, the steps to get access to the API, but we're already there. Frequently asked questions. And then if you go all the way down the bottom, there's going to be some example code here. Don't worry. Like I said, we're not going to be doing any code today. We're going to go to getting started and open it up in Postman. For those of you that do feel comfortable with writing a few scripts or integrating this API into your apps, we have some software development kits where you can pick the language of your choice, and we've got some sample code that you can on GitHub that you can use. But I'm going to run in Postman. So I'm going to open this up in a new tab. Postman, and what this is going to do is going to take all the code that we need for the messaging API and put it in Postman. Windows, I've actually already got Postman open. All right. Good afternoon, Michelle. Notice who I am because I've logged in. Cool. And so the first thing we're going to do is just have a look at the different. When you open this up, it'll automatically have your getting started APIs. The first one is to get your OAuth token, and that's the authentication to let you know, okay, I've got an account somewhere. In this case, it's TelstraDev account, and I'm allowed to use this API. So it's a free trial. All right. So to use that, we're going to need to have some credentials, kind of like our ID, so that we can prove that we have a TelstraDev account. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to this environment here. So we're in the messaging API environment, and we're going to edit that environment and add in our client ID and client secret. Client ID and client secret. We're going to go up here under develop. See, I'm still logged in. So under develop, we're going to go to my apps and keys. So like I said, when you create a new account, you get a free trial API, which includes the messaging API with 1,000 messages. Now, I will say here that a client ID and a client secret is just that. It's a secret, it's a key. But for the purposes of this demo, I've created a dummy account or a demo account that I can show you my client IDs and client secrets. But in the real world, you wouldn't share these with anyone else. So for example, if I've gone on and I've added some special APIs here that I pay for, and I give you the ID, you can start using those APIs and charge them to me. Bad. Shouldn't be sharing those. That's why it's sort of covered in the drop down here. Okay, so we're going to grab our client key, which is our client ID. I'm just going to Control-C, copy that, go back into Postman. Yeah, paste it here. Client secrets. Just make sure we've got both of those. All right, I'm going to update those. So hopefully when we go to create our authentication token, we've got those imported here. I'm going to send. I haven't done anything. All I've done is put it in there. Cool. All right, we've got an access token. So I kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but for the purposes of today, we're not going to go into too much detail on how the APIs are put together, just because you saw how easy it was. All I did was open something, copy and paste my keys, and send the response. Pretty easy. What I will point to up here, though, is this is the URL that the API is pointing to. And this goes into the TelstraDev gateway. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now. And the only other thing I'll say is that this API that we're doing in all these 3 calls are post APIs. So there's 2 kind of APIs we're going to talk about today. The first one is post. So you're sort of posting something, sending something. And the other one is a get API, which is where you'll be obviously requesting information. So there's a request and a response. And I think there's lots of information on YouTube, or maybe I can do a session another time on more details about API. So we've got our OAuth token. The parameters that have gone into that query is a key value pair. So the key is client ID and client secret, and that's all there is to it. So we've got that OAuth token, which expires, that's not in days, so it doesn't expire. It expires in a few minutes, I think. The next thing we're going to do is create a subscription. So the subscription is the virtual mobile number that you're going to use to send and receive text messages. So we're going to need this subscription. To be able to send and receive text, right? Let's have a look at what the body of this is. Nothing there. Cool. Pretty easy. Let's just send this one again. We told it to. Amazing. Cool. So when we send a API call in Postman, we're going to get a response back here. So this response is a status of 201. So anything with a 200 is good. And you can see that it's in green here as well. If it was maybe a 400 or a 500 number and it was in red, that's bad. But you can check out the API documentation to know exactly what each code means. That's really handy if you're getting errors. So this down the bottom here in Postman will tell you you've got a 404 error, your resource was not found. What I would do then is I would search for 404 in the messaging API documentation. If I can't find what it is, I'll then go onto the forum, search 404 error codes on the forum post. If I can't find it, I'll then post, write a forum post asking for help on that. Cool. So I've sent that subscription. What I get back is a destination address. And you can see this is an Australian mobile number. So that's my Australian mobile number that's been created that I'm going to use to send and receive text messages. So if you send a text to that number now, it's not going to do anything because it's just going into the cloud somewhere. That's a story for another time. And the number of active days it has is 29. So with the free trial number, this is alive for 30 days and then it goes away. Let's go to the good part. So far I haven't really done any coding or put anything in, right? Send SMS message is where we're going to be sending SMS. So what I'm going to do is go to the message body. Cool. And this is the raw, I guess, data form that the API call is going to go into. And I think it looks pretty nice, right? This doesn't look too much like code to me. It seems pretty obvious. What's your number going to? And what's the body? Pretty easy, right? And have a look at the messaging API documentation to see what these other ones are. So let's start with 2. I'm going to put in, who should I send it to? Test number. I'm going to get rid of this notify URL because we don't need that. Body, what should we say? Let's say your delivery is coming at 10 p.m. I don't think anyone is going to take a delivery at 10 p.m., but let's see what happens. So again, like I said, Postman is a pretty easy tool. This is like the greatest way to introduce using an API. This is just the testing tool. If you want to actually scale this up and integrate it into your systems, you're going to need to use the software development kits and write a little bit more code, but this is just a good way to start. Let's send that and see what happens. Ah, cool. Status 201 being created. Amazing. So like I said, green is good, 200 is good. It's being sent to that number. Message waiting means that at the time I sent the SMS, it hadn't sent yet, but it actually was sent, just was a bit delayed. Here's the message ID. So if you have any problems and you need to troubleshoot this message, you can use that message ID. And here's how you would find the status of the message. But again, that's a different API call. Oops, there we go. Oh, okay. There's a little bit more information here. It knows that it was an Australian mobile number and it was an SMS. Pretty easy. So let's see if I actually pop that message. Oh, amazing. Cool. So I've just got, I've got up my messaging web app here. And I can see that at 5:28, so that was a minute ago, The delivery is coming at 10 p.m. Let's do another one. Let's do another text. This is getting fun. This is easy. Your delivery is coming at 10 p.m. What should we say? Maybe if someone can give me an idea of what I can say. Oh, how about like welcome to GovHack 2020. Amazing. Welcome everyone. Let's see if this one works as well. I'll just jump over. Yeah. Welcome to GovHack 2020. We've got it. We've sent an API. We've made an API call to send a text message. How easy was that? No coding necessary. I didn't need to pay for anything or download anything except for the Postman tool. It's made my life easier, obviously. Yeah, so that was, what's 5:30 now? That was half an hour. I'll probably talk for 20 minutes of that. So I just wanted to show you guys how easy it was to get started with APIs, especially if you have the right tools and the right documentation. So I might just jump back to the presentation. I'm wondering if there's any questions so far. If you can post in the YouTube live chat if you've got any questions about the API so far. Otherwise, I'm just going to wrap up with a little bit more context around the APIs. So keep posting away in the chat at me. All right, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about how that actually works, like what we actually did just then. So I'm here with my mobile phone, which is, yeah, but I had it on the screen before. My mobile phone, I'm connected to 5G actually, because I'm on the Gold Coast here. So we're on 5G, but you might be on 4G. Sending a text to that number, well, this is just a dummy number, but when you send a text to a virtual mobile number, it gets sent to the TelstraDev API gateway. Now, at the moment, like I said, if I replied back to this number, it would just go nowhere. It would just go into the cloud, unless I set up the different API calls to be able to actually retrieve that message. So if I jump back into Postman, you can see that some of the other calls we've got here for provisioning, we can delete our subscription. So we've created that mobile number, we can delete it. And with the messaging, we've got a few more with SMS, like get the status of the message and retrieve the message. So that's what I meant with two-way communications. And we can also send MMS as well. Do all of that within this. But what would be really interesting, which is the next step, is to integrate the TelstraDev gateway back into your apps and your systems as a bad drawing of a database that I drew. So for example, I'll go back to the medical clinic. If you have the booking times and maybe the names and contact details of all the patients, this API system doesn't need to access all of that data. All it needs is at one point, it needs to know, send to this number and put this message in, and away you go. You've automated a process that usually would take you a lot of time, and you can spend your time on better, more critical things. All right, cool. So again, that was it. We just sent an SMS. And what could you do next with that? So the other things you can do with this API is send to multiple recipients at once. So if you want to send the same text to multiple people, the next thing I talked about is you can try and receive messages, start to do a chat. We actually have an example app on GitHub to do like a little chatbot. Sending SMS, which could be really fun and interesting. I've heard of some examples of people, they love, there's an API to generate a cat meme, and they've put the cat meme generator and the Telstra messaging API together so that every morning they get texted a different cat meme, which I think is a great application of this software, but whatever floats your boat. The next one I've got there is integrate the API into your systems. And then a couple of those 2 points at the bottom are sort of further reading and further interest on APIs. So the difference between POST and the GET API, the difference between REST APIs and other APIs. But the possibilities for these things are endless. So you're connecting if you connect your data and system to the messaging API, you'll be able to do those 4 things that I said. Data through APIs, hide complexity of functions behind those APIs, extend the functionality of your systems, and offer greater security because you're not offering the entire database. So it'd be really cool if you could think about how APIs or communication APIs, like the text, like the messaging API, could help improve your systems, especially as you're undertaking your GovHack challenges. So, Matt talked about before, we're all about open data, open source, having all abilities and experience levels, creating amazing ideas. And I think you guys anyone that's joining in today or even watching the recording, the possibilities are endless for you. And we will be adding a challenge, from TelstraDev that is going to include some of our APIs, so keep an eye out for that. But in preparing for this presentation, I had a couple of ideas of how I could use the messaging API just at home. My plants here, you think it's the Gold Coast, it's nice and humid, but my plants keep dying. So I was thinking of creating a system where a text reminder when my plants need watering. That'd be cool. And then now, I'm pretty cold here. I don't know how you guys in Melbourne are going, but I thought it'd be a great idea that I'd be able to set up a temperature sensor, get a text when the temperature is above 30 degrees, and clear my calendar so that I have nothing the next day I can go to the beach. So I hope you guys listening to this had a couple of different ideas of how to use it. We've also got some further reading here. If you'd like to find more about our APIs, like I said, we've got the blog there. We have other APIs too you can have a look at our registry. Take a look at the GitHub if you're interested in seeing some of the open source software development kits and projects that are out there from Telstra. I've just got a couple of some of my favorite free APIs that are out there you can practice with. So if you've tried out the messaging API, I recommend having a look at the weather API. One of the first ones I started with was a dog pictures API. So you put in the type of dog that you want to see, and the API will send you some pictures of those dogs. And there's a Star Wars one too if that floats your boat. So find something you're interested in, and I'm sure there'll be an API about it. I'm looking to add more tutorials about using the messaging API and other APIs on the TelstraDev portal, so keep a lookout for that. And if this is too easy, you want to do more, I've got some advanced API tutorials on my GitHub. So the secret to getting started is really about using open source communities. I always think that copy and pasting isn't cheating, it's just being efficient. So that's how I got started, and I'm sticking to it. All right. So thank you for joining in today on this short little presentation. I've been Michelle Howie from TelstraDev, and I see there's been a couple of questions in the chat, which is amazing. So I'm going to jump into the chat now and have a look at what you guys have been saying. So is there an equivalent SMS service for New Zealand GovHack? Oh, interesting question. So at the moment, thank you for the question from New Zealand. If you create a mobile subscription, because Telstra is an Australian mobile network, it will always create an Australian mobile number. So that's the number that you'll get created. But you can send and receive texts internationally. So you can use this API from New Zealand, and you can send and receive your 1,000 free messages to destinations in New Zealand, I think, definitely in Australia. Yeah, I'd love to hear you give it a try and let us know on the forum if you have any questions or suggestions. So yeah, you can definitely try it from New Zealand. Postman's using the API to test SMS sending is the next question. Yes, so Postman is an API testing tool. So like I said, the point of using it was that there was no code involved. So what Postman is doing is I'll open it up again quickly. It's making everything a lot clearer and cleaner. If you're looking at some sort of other API scripts, if you haven't done web development before, maybe you don't know any programming languages, so this makes it a lot easier to test with. And what I love about it is it gives you that response in like a clear, concise way. So it gives you the status of the API. Was it sent? Was it fulfilled? Let me give you an example. Let's see what happens if I put a number that doesn't exist. 404 not found. So 404, it just told me something's gone wrong. The requested resource could not be found. So if you go onto the API documentation, it will tell you that a 404 could mean that either you don't have a mobile number, like you haven't created your subscription, or the subscription that you're sending to doesn't exist. So that's a great question for testing. Cool. Okay, someone just posted that they tried to create a subscription but got a 500 tech error. So if you have a look at this one, hopefully there's a little bit more information. And I'm so glad that you're trying to follow along at home. This is amazing. And they've said that the body was empty. So let's see what happens if I send an empty body. I can still send it, maybe if it's completely empty. There we go. So body missing is an error, so you always need to have those messages are still coming through. Cool. So still got that a blank message and I still got a test. When the body was empty, it means nothing. And I think this is just to reiterate that Postman is a testing tool, and you can really play around and see, what kind of combinations work here. And I hope that person that posted that question that are having issues, maybe have a look at the TelstraDev forums, because I'm finishing up my talk now. I would love to sit here and go through your code and help you do that API, but maybe we can do that offline after. And definitely reach out to me on Twitter or through the TelstraDev portal if you want to actually try and implement this into your solution. We have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to let the questions keep going, and I might just really quickly go over a little bit about the Internet of Things. So Internet of Things is the billions of connected devices that are on the network. And it can also be called a few different things, but one of the kinds of IoT is LPWAN, which is a low power wide area network. So those IoT devices are the kind of ones that are like sensors. They might be out in regional areas, and they might be doing things like checking temperature or water meters. And one example of this, that whole system of IoT devices sending data back to a system is called environmental monitoring. So when you are getting data, you need to make sure you're measuring what matters, making sure the usage is efficient and safe. So a couple of examples of this are cities. So one of my favourite examples, I'm from Adelaide, and so we implemented this a few years ago, but the council bins used to be able to let you know if they were full or not. So these bins were smart devices. They were connected to the Internet of Things network. They might be using an API to send data back to the council system to say, okay, these ones are full, please pick these up. And the garbage person can go and pick them up. That's a good example to save time. Another example would be to save energy. I'm sure you guys have heard before, having sensors to know if there are people in the room or not. You might not want to use video cameras because that's a security risk. People might not want to be filmed, but using things like heat sensors or motion sensors, you can see if there are people in the room. And then you might have an API call going to a light somewhere to turn the light on or off. And that's an example of saving power. So I brought up those examples just for you guys, for your, GovHack hacks and other hacks to see how APIs link in with the Internet of Things. But yes, please do get involved with GovHack if you haven't registered already. I'm really excited to be a mentor, and Army and the Telstra team too, who've been monitoring the chat today, will be involved as well. Send me a message if you've made something with the API. I'd love to hear your story. You can post in our community forums. And we're making new tutorials all of the time, so we'd love to hear your feedback on what could be better. Like I said, you can find us on Twitter. That's TelstraDev, and that's mine. Find me on LinkedIn if you want to ask anything. But I'm really excited to be part of GovHack this year, and I can't wait to see what you guys make of it. So that's all for me today. Thank you, Matt, and thank you for the team for having me, and thank you, Army and the TelstraDev team for being on the chat today. You can keep sending questions in the YouTube comment section, and Army and I will respond to them, or for the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, post on our forums if you're watching this as a recording. Yep.
All right, thank you, Michelle. That was excellent. It's really got me thinking of a couple of ideas using some of the GovHack's initiatives with the open data. What we can be doing with the API with SMS. It's quick and easy. I've done it before. I've used the SMS API back in, I think it was about 18 years ago, before version 1. Then I used version 1 8 years ago, and version 2 when it came out. So I'm very familiar with the SMS API there. But I love how it's got the open API. You quickly import it into Postman or any other platform that supports open API, and you're up and running. There's no code, as you said. One of the things I was thinking about was, so just as an idea for some of the people that might be entering as a hacker into GovHack, is a good example was during the fires down the south coast of New South Wales. I was down there over Christmas. My family property was impacted by it. We lost power, but also the cell phone towers were losing power and the generators were going off, and there was a lot going on there. We didn't have any internet access. So whilst apps like Fires Near Me, which is a whole lot of open data and it's available online, it's a great app and you can track all the fire and you can get all the updates, we didn't have internet. we didn't have mobile phone, the ADSL connection had gone down because the local exchange had lost power as well. So it's a perfect scenario where SMS technology, whilst it's been around for a long time, comes in handy, that you could have a subscription where you send a message to 1-800 fire updates, and you get those SMS alerts back based on your area, and they'll come through when you get the signal. So we went down to the beach, and when the wind was blowing the right way, we got a signal from up the next tower. So there's a couple of great scenarios where you could very easily use existing open data, bring in a technology like this, and play with it. But also, as you mentioned, with the Internet of Things and the narrowband, the IoT devices, I've had to play with them and stuff as well with the Telstra API, and they're great. They're good fun to play with. But imagine joining them up with some data sets on things like water flow through stormwater drains, or and getting that all together and coming up with some crazy idea that works with smart cars, for example. So thank you very much for the presentation. We do have another session coming up at 6 o'clock Sydney time, which is the AWS basics. So we have an introduction, and then we've got another session after that as well on AI and machine learning. So if you jump on our Hackerspace, then you can find the links there to those live streams as well. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.